Welcome to The Independent Musician. Our weekly podcast will focus on the independent artist and the music market at large. You'll hear from those artists as well as music execs, tech experts, and marketing leaders from around the globe. We'll discuss what it takes to make it in the biz and how you can overcome obstacles as you progress your craft, all the while making it interesting and fun. Now, here's your host, Mark Skoda.
This is Mark Skoda, and welcome to the Independent Musician Podcast. We're joined today by Max Gowan. Max is a longtime musician and artist, focusing on everything from engineering through to his recent collaboration on an indie alternative album called Glossolalia. Max, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Mark. Appreciate being here.
So where are you at, Max? Where are you living right now?
Yeah, I live in Raleigh, North Carolina, which is my hometown. I went to college in D.C., but then I moved back here after graduating college, and I've just been out here doing audio work and working on my own music.
So is that, at this point, you obviously have been doing a lot of audio work. Is this a full-time job for you? Do you make a living at your musicianship and artistry?
Yeah, I do. I was supplementing it with various day jobs here and there for a while, and then this summer I finally was able to, transition to the full-time, mainly mixing and mastering, but I'm starting to dip into recording as well, which has been a lot of fun. So recording other people, that is. I've been recording myself for a long time, but
in fact, I noticed that I think you've been in music since the ripe old age of about 16. Is that right?
Yeah, that's about it. I mean, I've been playing guitar since I was 8, but I've been releasing stuff since, about 16, 17.
So it's interesting because you are one of those unicorn artists that actually makes a living as an indie and sits there and actually pays the bills based on your work in production and obviously continuing to evolve your music as well.
Yeah, I feel insanely lucky to be in the position I'm in right now. It's definitely, if you'd asked me even like 2 years ago if this would be possible, I probably would have said no. But yeah, it's honestly, it's really cool to be able to do what I love every day. I love that.
So how did you come to the engineering side? I mean, you obviously went to school in D.C. That's not a place for training a lot of engineers in audio work. It's mostly politicians and lawyers and the deep staters, so to speak.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a valid question. When I was in high school, I mean, music was always my number one thing growing up. But I probably, like many people who are young and start out with music, thought that there was no way I'd have a future in that. And so I was also interested in politics, kind of like you were hinting at. And so I originally went to school for poli-sci at American University. And then about halfway in, you kind of get a taste for that and realize that's not the best thing in the world. So I ended up switching to a communications major, and then my minor was audio technology. But my minor ended up kind of really gripping me a lot more. I was working in the recording studio there, getting to actually record and mix like on the fly with real bands coming in. So that really held my attention the most out of anything. And so I ended up, pursuing that after college.
So your minor became your major.
Right, exactly. not officially, but unofficially.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's interesting. A lot of people come to the music business from various backgrounds. So many people start off in many cases in another area of study or another area of life experience. A lot of folks, frankly, that I've met have started music at the ripe old age of their, 4, 5, 6 years old, taking lessons and sort of aspiring to be that rock star on stage or that master producer. And obviously it is a passion, and one that obviously you discovered as you were going through your education, not only before, of course, playing guitar, but more importantly to figure out that beyond guitar, you wanted to develop some other skills that could pay the bills.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I think the older I got too, the more into production I got as a listener in music, and I think you can be a little myopic. Like when you start out as a guitar player, you're kind of listening to the guitar
Yes.
and the vocal, obviously. And then, the more you listen to music, the more you're like, wow, that's really cool what the bass is doing there, what the drums are doing. And so I wanted to learn all those instruments, basically to try to be my own 4-piece. And so that's what I ended up doing starting late in high school, I started branching out into producing and playing more instruments as well. So
it's interesting. My son is actually right now in college for a music and entertainment production degree at the local community college. He's 16. He'll be finishing that when he finishes his high school degree at the same time. It's kind of a cool program we have here.
That's awesome.
It's a pain in the butt for me, and I'll be more specific. It's a pain in the ass for me because when I listen to music, I'm sort of listening to music less critically, right? When he listens to music, he's telling me what's all wrong about the production. and I'm over there, I'm saying, Matt, okay, I get it. I understand you hear things that I don't hear, and the average person isn't going to hear. Like the drums aren't far enough in the front or the vocals are too far back. And I'm going, dude, I just like this song. It's a really good song, okay? And so do you find yourself being more critical of artists generally, and particularly as you listen to music as a listener? Are you always trying to sort of get those, as they say in the business, ears?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I struggled with a lot, especially when I was first doing my like real serious deep dive into mixing and production. Your ears get more and more refined to hear certain things, and you don't really there's a point where you stop looking at the song as the big picture that a listener would hear, and you start hearing all the individual elements, and that can really, for me at least, it pulls me out of it too much. So the nice thing, I feel like at this point I've been mixing long enough that if a friend texts me like, hey man, check out this song or something, I feel like I have kind of trained myself to not listen to the mix. I try to just listen to the song, and then on subsequent listens, I might start thinking about the mix, but really it's about the song at the end of the day.
Right. Do you have a studio yourself? Are you working at another studio, or how are you engaged in actual audio engineering at this moment?
Yeah, right now my studio is all at home. And it's nice when you start so young, because I look around my room and I'm like, man, where did I get all this stuff? And it's like, you can build up gear slowly throughout the years if you start pretty young. So yeah, my friend Travis and I are starting to record bands out of my home studio here. And, we have drums fully set up. We have a bunch of mics, we have good treatment for mixing and mastering and recording. And I love being able to work out of my own home. It's awesome.
So as a guitar player early on, and did you, at that point, had you been in any bands? Had you been playing out live, or had you been primarily a solo artist?
Yeah, it's funny. I actually got really into metal music, and heavy music when I was in middle school. And so I was, my first band, I was a guitar player in a band called Fixated. And we were a death metal band, and we played a show probably when I was in 8th grade. That was my first bar show that I played. And it was one of those horrible bills where they put 10 bands on the bill, and 2 of them are hip hop and one's metal, and it's just a mess. And it's funny looking back on it, because I think it was a good experience to have as, an 8th grader, playing in front of people in a bar setting. But yeah, I feel like it's a classic kind of chaotic, messy first show story.
Well, but we all come from different areas, and I certainly know my son, who started off at 4 years of age in drum lessons, and before that, at 18 months old, he got his first drum. His grandma asked him what he wanted for Christmas, and he said drum, and that's what he got. And I remember coming out of church on Sundays, and across the street was a retail complex, and the local high school drum line would practice there, and he'd hear the drums going. We'd have to go over there, and here he is at 2.5 years old, holding my hand, just mesmerized by the music, by the drums. And then he started beating on everything that had a possibility to beat on, including my back, the back seat of my car, and everything else, which is kind of interesting to watch the evolution of musicians. It still astounds me, as a musician, you certainly can appreciate this, that they remember all these songs and are able to play them, have a repertoire of 30, 40, 50 different songs, and actually understand and can translate that to the music at the time with a band or playing solo. It's just staggering the way the mind begins to evolve to embrace music generally and to be able to then play music. And that is, I think, the creative side that I find so interesting about the artistry that we are discussing now.
Yeah, I think that phenomenon is like it's fascinating because it's a combination of, your regular conscious logical thinking brain and muscle memory and instinct. And I feel like there aren't a whole lot of things in the world that kind of bring those sides of a person together so well. But yeah, music is definitely I think it's amazing how it does that. And drumline, that stuff is fascinating too, because like some of the stuff that those folks are able to do on just a snare drum or like, just like their rudiments and stuff.
Yes.
Like when they translate that to a drum kit, some of those people can be deadly on a drum kit too, which is awesome.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It really is. And I think, people don't understand when they hear artists. First of all, there's a heck of a lot of practice and a lot of time. I mean, I can tell you, you talk about rudiments and to be able to learn, I think, 97 different rudiments and practice those and demonstrate those and get tested for those. I mean, it's pretty wild. I mean, he was in some of those efforts on various competitions. We have a guitar player in his band now who just shreds the hell out of the guitar. Astounds me. I watch him. It's kind of interesting. I watch him when he plays, and when he starts off, he's kind of like still there with you, and then all of a sudden he's gone. He's gone from you, and he's there with the guitar, and that is it. And that's what he does. And it's fascinating to watch that transition in a musician and their behaviors, because they are so one with their instrument, and that other side of the brain that takes off, that has all that musical knowledge and sensibilities, just begins to illuminate that for you through the instrument.
Yeah, and it's interesting too how the audience can connect with that, because it's kind of like you're describing watching someone. You can tell when they have entered the zone, if you will,
right.
or that kind of special place, and it's so interesting how, kind of getting back to that instinct thing, like the audience can tell when you're starting to just operate on instinct, and it's really interesting to experience that both as a performer and as an audience member.
Music is so fascinating for me because of the fact that it is able to move so many people in so many different ways. We talk about all the genres that are out there, and certain, people love certain genres. I've always been a guy that loves rock and hard rock. One of the bands I follow right now is out of Monterrey, Mexico, and it's The Warning. It's three sisters that are just sort of like hard rock, almost a light metal, but very cool. And
nice.
It's enjoyable. It's enjoyable for people to embrace. The challenge, of course, is that it's a tough business, right? And I was earlier talking on a podcast with a public speaking professional, and we talked about how artists today have to be able to craft their way forward to be able to make this a actual business for them, to be able to live off the money that they earn. And, it's essentially, as you've done, as a guitarist, first and foremost, began to love music, and then decided that, coming into engineering was a way to leverage your artisan skills, but at the same time, build other technical skills that could benefit you and other artists overall. Isn't that right?
Yeah, definitely. And for me, I appreciate having multiple avenues to explore with music, because for me, I think the creative side of music, being the actual, performing and writing side,
right,
is obviously, I'm extremely passionate about that. But at the same time, I think I'm glad that it's not exclusively what I do, because I sometimes wonder if it would lose its kind of value as like an escape, if that makes sense. I think, yeah, it's nice to have kind of a more logical, practical side of things, being the engineering side of things, and then also have the creative side, which is, the performing and writing. So.
Now, do you have a pretty large music community there in the Raleigh area? Are you drawing your customers, your clients, primarily from the Raleigh area? Or are you getting people from all over the country? In other words, are they sending you raw tracks to mix?
Yeah, so it's more of the latter, actually. It's more of people who I've met through my music online, or through touring across the country, or just through word of mouth now, where, a lot of people we're doing it all remote. They're sending me all the raw tracks, and I mix it for them, and we communicate digitally. But Raleigh does have a great music scene. Like, my live band is made up of amazing musicians that I've just been able to, be friends with here and play shows with here. And there's a lot of great bands like I mentioned my friend Travis earlier. He's in a band called Truth Club. They put out a record in 2019, and they're about to put out another one that's going to be awesome. And there's a ton of good bands down here. So it's kind of a mix of both local and national. Yeah.
And you are obviously on Spotify and other streaming platforms under your name, Max Gowan. Do you also trade under your band name, or are you sort of the lead of the band? Are you branded Max Gowan Band?
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't. I wouldn't call it. I wouldn't have named the band my name were the musicians playing on the recordings a bunch, but the recordings are mostly me.
Okay.
And then my friends in the area who make up the band, Cruz, Paul, and Ryan, that's the band. They actually helped me put together a live version because the recordings are so layered that we kind of have to reimagine how we're going to do it as a 4-piece live. And that's really fun. They all bring their own skill set to it, and they bring their own flair to it. So, yeah, that's why it's under my name on the recordings. So,
right.
Yeah.
And obviously, you're producing a lot of music in the sense that, as a single artist, you playing all your pieces. Are you using a lot of technology? Are you playing live instruments in the compilations, or how are you effectively doing that today?
It's a lot of live instruments. The more that I progress into recording, the more I'm bringing in things like samples and field recordings and any kind of texture I can add that way. But mostly, most of my songs are built guitar, bass, and drums live tracked. But I'm kind of overdubbing with myself in that case.
Okay.
So,
yeah, and I think for me, the live instrument has a definite organic feel that MIDI instruments don't. Oftentimes, I can't stand drum machines. Honestly, for me,
sure.
What I call the cicada cymbals or the cicada hi-hat that you hear in so much rap music and is just drives you crazy. Rick Beato's funny because he was reviewing a particular song that's up for the Grammys, and he was listening to it, and of course that and he said, I thought the cicada hi-hat was gone. I thought we were done with that. And it is so boring. I tell my son Matthew, I said, I listen to real drums. I can't listen to all that fake drum stuff. And I think, one of the reasons I believe that touring artists in the legacy genres are still out there is because they were organic. They played all their own instruments. They're able to be imperfectly perfect when they play. And you don't find that enough in some of the music, in particularly the rap genre, where you could basically sit down with GarageBand almost and a beat that you select from somebody and then basically put some lyrics to it. Putting together a actual compilation of a rock song, for instance, you're required to pull all those parts together and write the melody and write the lyrics. And it's a far more complex set of processes than it is to put out something that is, I call it, really disposable music. I mean,
yeah, I definitely hear what you're saying. I mean, I think in my view, a lot of people are doing amazing work in very inorganic sounding genres. Like I'm very into a lot of hip hop, a lot of modern R&B, a lot of things that pull an electronic influence. But I think for me, it's a matter of what's appropriate, right? Like, you're talking about those rapid, like kind of trap hi-hats that came around in like the early 2010s, I want to say, is when that started getting popular. And like I was at the gas station like a couple of years ago, and I heard a country song playing with those hi-hats. And that's where I draw the line. Is I'm like, okay, this is like, this is going to be considered an incredibly like canned sound when we look back on it in a few years. It's every genre has its pitfalls like that, though.
That's right.
And I think like there's a lot of people doing amazing work in the hip hop space. It's all about just what's appropriate and what's creative. And I think anybody can make something creative. So,
well, that's right. I think there's an evolution all the time. A lot of people right now criticize country because it's become more like pop. And I understand that a lot of the current country is interesting. I'm sort of old school. I just like a lot of the rock songs that are coming out now. As I said, I follow, even Greta Van Fleet, although Greta tends to be a bit too much Led Zeppelin-like, but I still love what they're doing.
Sure.
And I think there's a lot of bands out there. We've just signed a recent band, Fracture, and I love their music. It's really hard rock. It's driving. The guys are cool, and it's fun to listen to for me. And so, I like the complexity of music, and I think to your point, when you're adding other elements even into hip hop or rap, I like hip hop. Hip hop's a different set of sounds over pure rap, right? In my opinion, and largely because it tends to be more melodic. Also tends to add more instrumentation from time to time as well. So I guess for me, it's always about the complexity of the music, which tends to impact my feeling about the music.
Sure. Yeah. And I think when someone has a great idea, you can tell, you can tell it's a great idea, even if it's, made with synthesizers and drum machines or something, like if the song is there, and it's a fantastic melodic idea or a fantastic lyrical idea, that's kind of what pulls me in. But if someone's relying on very trendy production to mask a mediocre song, that's when it bothers me.
Yeah, exactly. So as it relates to sort of, your music, obviously, are you doing more of your own individual performance publishing? Or are you beginning to work with other artists as you go forward, with your new album? I mean, the whole idea here, I think, it seems to me it was a collaboration event. Is that right?
Yeah, well, this album is mainly me, but I definitely brought in more collaborators on it than I have on previous projects. So, I have several different good friends of mine who are great drummers who played drums on some of the tunes on the album. I played drums on probably half the songs on the album.
Okay.
My good friend and very recent former roommate, she just moved to go to grad school, actually. Her name's Caroline White, and she has a project called Infinity Crush. And she's a really great singer, really great guitar player. And she also plays a lot of other cool instruments like French horn and viola. And so she helped out on the first track pretty heavily on this new album. And I also helped co-produce her new record, which should be coming out pretty soon. So I'm definitely trying to dip my toes into that more as far as playing and producing on other people's records, because the more I've been doing that, the more I'm like, wow, this is so fun. I think music had been a little bit more of a solitary activity for me earlier in life, especially recording. Not necessarily performing, but recording. The older I get, the more I realize how fun it is to do that with other people.
Well, exactly right. I mean, there's just being able to play off of each other and work with each other. It sort of makes the music more interesting for the performer as well. So turning to the album, Glossolalia, what is it about? I mean, first of all, why did you select that, weirdness title we talked about a moment ago? Why is it titled Glossolalia? Where does that come out of? What was the inspiration?
Yeah, so glossolalia, I might be butchering the definition a little bit, but I believe it means someone spontaneously speaking in an unknown tongue. So it's almost a biblical
Pentecostal, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's definitely that phenomenon in that church. And I think a few other religious traditions as well. And I liked that. I was drawn to that idea, but more in a musical sense. I think some of my music, it's hard to talk about your own music because I'm sure the way I perceive it isn't necessarily the way everyone would, but I think it can sometimes be a little bit psychedelic and a little bit, based around texture and emotion created by texture. And so I wanted it to feel spontaneous and kind of like a new language, if that makes sense.
Yes,
I wanted this record to feel that way.
Yeah.
And so that's where the title came from. And then, the song to song, the lyrical ideas, there's no central theme on this record as far as lyrics go. I think each song has its own lyrical theme.
Is it a full album, 7 songs, 10 songs, 12 songs? What did you do?
Yeah, this is an 8-track record. So it's clocks in about half an hour.
Terrific. And when are you releasing that, actually? I don't see it's out yet.
Yeah, so there's 2 singles that are available on streaming right now, and then the full album is actually out this Friday, September 2nd.
Okay, so The Guardian and Ornamental are the 2 singles?
That's right.
Cool. Which one do you like better? We'll play it a little bit here. And
That's a great question. They're both very different songs. I think Guardian I like better because Guardian, I had a very strong lyrical concept for that. That song is about my guardian angel being drunk and not making it down in time to save me. And I had a lot of fun building a song around that. And it's also a bit more of a rocker than what I'm used to making. You know, my music is, you could say it falls a bit more into singer-songwriter territory, but this one is like a full-blown rock production. So I'm excited about this one.
Well, let's let the listeners take a listen to this, and we'll play it right now.
Sure.
All right, that's a great piece of music. I love that hook that we just talked about there, Max. In fact, that Guardian Angel, and certainly that is got that inspiration from some of the ideas of church and religiosity, but yet in a very cool sounding vocal and mellowed song. It's very cool. Very nice job.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that.
So the album, as I said, hits very shortly. Are you working on other things with other artists at the moment? You mentioned that you're bringing some bands in. Have you begun working with anybody specifically, or?
Yeah, so I think as far as projects that'll be coming out soon that I've worked on, I mentioned my friend Caroline, her project Infinity Crush. Her new record, I'm guessing, will be out within the year. And that was a collaborative effort between me and her and my friend Travis, who kind of co-runs the studio with me. And I'm very excited about that record because she's an amazing songwriter. Mm-hmm. And I think we brought some interesting textures and elements into that record. I would describe it almost as kind of like a haunted country album in a way. It's a little bit ghostly, a little bit ambient, but there's like slide guitar, there's twangy guitar at moments. And so I think it's a cool kind of blend of a lot of genres that I enjoy a lot. So I'm looking forward to that one.
Terrific. Now, you also work with artists to help build audience. Are you doing work with them on their social media, or how are you affecting that?
I used to do a little bit more of that than I do now. I think the more I've done of that work, the more I've seen that you can't really guarantee anything from social media. As much as people would like to think that, I mean, social media is an amazing tool. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it's definitely like the way that I've, gotten the vast majority of my audience is through, putting my music online. But I think it's not the silver bullet that it sometimes is made out to be. So I don't want to promise anything to artists as far as, fame and riches from some social media advertising, but it's definitely an effective tool though.
Yeah, I think, we talk about that a lot on the show as it relates to the independent artist really taking advantage of all the ecosystem of the music industry. And today that's expanded more than ever because it's not only about producing a piece of music and distributing it through the various channels, I should say, such as streaming, but it's also about leveraging sort of the entire community that you do business with. I spoke about the issue of finding those 1,000 super fans versus 1 million people that just don't engage. If you earn $100 per super fan, that's $100,000 a year. You basically are making a living at music,
right?
And it's important to engage at all these levels. That's why we do Iron Gate Records Radio. That's why we do this podcast. We also do the Rising Star radio show. And we really try to point back to the artists and point back to the label so that they get more amplification of their own message. But it does take a lot of work, and everybody has to be engaged. And you're right, you can't guarantee any results. You can only continue to work the program. And if you gain 3 and 5 and 10, and you're doing that every single week and every single month, eventually you're going to get to that 1,000 number where people are buying your merchandise and buying your tickets and supporting you perhaps with a Patreon support or tipping you if you're doing live shows, etc. I think that's, in today's world, the ability to sort of make a living at music is either you begin to branch off into other areas, as you've done, into mixing and editing and mastering, as well as playing and releasing your music, which to me is one of the necessary elements, and of course gigging and being able to promote your music on the road and being able to sell merchandise and sell tickets and get tips. I mean, all those things are necessary. And when I look at this, I always tell people, I said, as I was a CEO of a publicly traded company, my days were averaging 12 hours a day, and then plus travel, plus back and forth, and in fact weekends, and it was always on call. Well, musicians don't see their day in that context, right? And so you aren't going to be able to, if I wanted to work, a couple rehearsal sessions a week and play a gig out Fridays and Saturdays for a couple, 3 hours and call it a week, that is not going to get me a couple $100,000 a year salary. Okay, it just doesn't happen that way. So I think you're pretty wise to actually have branched out and at the same time releasing your music. But also, I think very interestingly for you, it seems to me, going into editing and mixing and mastering music through your efforts as an engineer really enhance what you're doing in your own musical venture as well.
Yeah, thank you. I do think it's a huge advantage to be able to, once you know, for example, what it takes to get a good, clear, potentially loud master on a song. If you start the recording process with that knowledge, it really helps with everything downstream from there, right? And so that's been helpful for me. And, I also think, I think you have to find what it is that you're willing to do for hours and hours a day. For me, for example, I know a lot of people who hate mixing, which I get because it can be, when I first started out, I thought it was going to be this huge chore that I'd have to do anytime I wanted to finish my record and put it out and have it sound good. And then the more I did it for my own music, the more I realized, wow, I actually like, tweaking knobs for hours at a time. And so I think that for me was just an obvious path, because I really can get lost in it in a good way, and get lost in it for, days on end on a project. And so I think whatever it is for someone that they have that connection to, it's kind of like the cliched saying, it won't feel like work.
Well, that's right. Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're connected to your craft and you are enjoying it, you're absolutely right. I know even in my son's case, I watch him doing some production work, and the technology, first of all, he's a young kid. He's teethed on technology. And they just basically, it's inherent, right? It's just what they do now. And particularly with the kinds of tools like Pro Tools and other DAWs that you have, and recording tools and plugins and everything else that's available to the engineer, it's pretty remarkable. I mean, you can even make a pretty bad artist sound pretty darn good today.
Yeah, definitely.
That's why they don't; those type of artists don't generally tour, and they're not on gigs. All right, but the fact of the matter is, it's interesting, right? Because it challenges you, challenges the mind, and you're learning to use these tools effectively, and that's a lot of fun. And then when that finally crosses over where they become second nature, that the tools are no longer something you're learning, but something you're just using like a shovel. You're now focusing on the elements of actual composition and sound and feeling, and that is very different once you get to that point. And clearly, you already are there.
Well, yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I mean, I think I kind of keep going back to this logical versus creative dichotomy, and I feel like just striking the balance between the two is tricky, but I think that's where most great art comes from, is striking that balance. So I really try to walk that line as best I can.
So Max, where do they find you as it relates to your engineering? Can people send you music? Do you have a website? I didn't actually see that, but for your engineering side.
Yeah, for the engineering side of things, my website is maxgowanaudio.com. And yeah, you can find examples of my work there. You can find before and after, and more information about me. And anyone is welcome to email me, a song, and see if we want to work together that way too. My email is just maxgowanmusic@gmail.com.
Terrific. It's interesting. One of the advantages I have in doing these podcasts is I get a lot of different guests. And the thing that keeps coming through to me as I am talking to people is there are a lot of people who are being successful in the music industry, the industry in its broadest terms. And a lot of them have made their way because they've learned something new, they're using a new tool, they're integrating various skill sets. And here you are, at 25, 26 years old or so, and, you're making a living at doing what you love, and you're your own boss. And that's a great feeling in today's quote unquote gig economy, right?
Yes. Yeah. It's, again, I really did not envision it happening this quickly. And I think it felt like this major risk to me, when I first really started flirting with the idea of doing this full time. Mm-hmm. But something that became more clear to me when you look out and see what a lot of jobs are like is security is a little bit of an illusion anyway, with a lot of things in life.
Look around the world today, my friend. It is a big illusion. I mean, we are living in the Matrix at some days, the way I look at it. You're absolutely right. For
sure. And so for me, it was like, why not do this now? And I think that there are a lot of people who would be able to take a similar leap, not even with music necessarily, really with anything that again, it goes back to what can you spend hours doing, and just be in love with the whole time. And so, if you have something like that, there's probably a path forward for you to do it, for a living. So.
Well, that's right. I think also, and music is special, and the music business is very special because it is so dynamic, so changing as it relates to the technology, the way music is consumed today. There is a disposable element of some music today as well. The fact that Spotify has 60,000 new songs uploaded every single day, you've got to have a niching strategy to get noticed, and it just becomes part of the overall play. All of this is not unique to the music business, but the music business is unique in as much as it's not a system, right? You're just as you've done on your most recent album, which you're about to release, Glossolalia. It didn't exist a moment ago. It was a definition of speaking in tongues, essentially. I'll use that roughly. Right. And now it becomes a concept around which an entire album is developed, and music that didn't exist a moment ago now exists. And I think that's what's kind of interesting to me about the music business. I worked for corporations in the past, and those corporations had systems and services already in place. And I plugged in. I became, an hourly worker, and then a manager, and then an executive. But, outside of creating new services, it wasn't creative every day, right? The fact of the matter is, in music, anytime you create a new song, it didn't exist a moment ago. And that's a very satisfying feeling for a lot of the artists I talk with. And it is their song. It is the representation of what they feel and what they're thinking at that moment in time. And it may never hit. It may never be heard by a lot of people. But it is an expression of who you are, and that to me is an important element of being a musician, or whether it's as an engineer and doing a mix, how you make it sound, how you express the elements of that song. That's the fascinating part about music and the business generally. And as you're a young man, and I tell people this all the time, you're not going to be young forever. If you're going to chase your dream, chase it when you're 18, 20, 25, because at the end of the day, you can very easily go to work in a regular job 9 to 5 if you have to at some point.
Right.
As I tell my own son, I was working full time before I graduated from high school, and I didn't go to college until I was 23, and I then went 4 years working full time while going to school full time. Did my undergraduate master's and started a PhD. But I didn't have to do anything at 17 years old, and I say chase your dream now, chase it today. That's the whole point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I've had some similar experiences. Like, I definitely have not done the music thing full time my whole life. I worked in a call center for a year. I've worked worked at an electronics manufacturer, so like soldering and building things, and I've done a lot of customer service jobs, and I think all that stuff is still good for you. Like, I mean, of course,
teaches how to work.
Right, and it teaches you also like how to handle situations that are difficult, which is, regardless of what you do, that is a universal constant, is you're always going to have to handle tough things. But yeah, I just realized, the more time I stay not doing exactly what I want to be doing, the harder it's going to be to do what I want to do. So I decided to take the leap earlier.
Somebody was joking with me the other day, talked about this music business and a label, and they said, this would be a great business if we didn't have to deal with the artists. Being an artist tends to be, somewhat interesting, of course. But I love it. I love the different people I get to meet, their different takes on things. It's a real joy to me. And particularly, as not being a formal sort of music business guy, I've come to it because of the work my son's done. And as a business guy, I wrote the business plan and decided to start the label with Greg Upchurch of Three Doors Down, and I've always built businesses for people. I've done mergers and acquisitions, and my education is in systems and technology. So, I used to write programs and all that sort of thing. So lots of experience, and frankly, transitioning that into the music business was relatively easy because I look at the music business not as a who do you know with my hand out all the time, but how do I provide a transparent relationship with the artist so that the artist can begin to groom and craft their own artistry and basically take advantage of technology, consulting, and frankly manage their budgets effectively. And then of course do things like we're doing here, educating people to hear other people's stories so they don't feel alone. It can be a lonely feeling business if you don't see other success models, because everybody isn't up on stage with 5,000 screaming fans.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of what you just mentioned too, a lot of those skills are not inherently strengths of many artists. And so it's important to have people, if you are, a fantastic musician or a fantastic songwriter or something, you may not be as strong in some of those logistical areas or some of those like promotional areas. And so it's great to have a label for that reason too. That's what they're there for.
And that's right. And we at Iron Gate Records, I mean, we don't own any of their songs. We don't own their publishing. We don't even take any money off their streaming or off their merchandise. The whole idea here is to sort of provide a vehicle, first of all, as a real label, to be able to promote their music, provide them the sort of marketing tools and the analytics that they might not otherwise have themselves, and to do so in a programmatic fashion, because at that point in time we can do it at a lower cost and provide more services. And that's really what it's about. And it would be a great joy to me to have somebody on our label have Columbia calling, or another label, and say, we'd love to collaborate with you because we want to take this artist forward, and I'd be happy to do that. So for me, the joy is really watching the artists grow. Some of them early in their careers, some of them just starting out, some of them later in their careers. But everybody has something to contribute, and that's the way we have to look at it.
That's great. I mean, I think if every label had that attitude, the world would be a much better place.
Well, we try our best, and we don't have it all dialed in yet, but we're getting closer. And the nice thing about using technology and being a technologist is that we know the music business is going to change. We know it's going to transition. And if you have the technology infrastructure, you can transition more easily. And I think that's what's important. And let the artist be the artist. Let them make their music, but also get them to sort of think about these things in a more programmatic fashion so that they work harder at building those super fans. I keep coming back to that very, very simple thing. Find those 1,000 people out of the entire market that you deal with. Find those 1,000 people that will pay you $100 a year in some form or fashion, and then make them your buddies forever.
Yeah, no, that I think you see that model, whether it was intentional or just happened organically. I feel like you see that model happen with so many bands, that not even necessarily famous bands, just bands that have reached a level of success that's sustainable. It's because of a smaller, enthusiastic group of people like that.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Max, I appreciate the time with you today. Again, Max Gowan, and his new forthcoming album is Glossolalia, and Max can be found on all the streaming platforms under Max Gowan, but also he has his engineering website. Again, you want to give that to us, Max, one more time?
Yeah, it's maxgowanaudio.com.
I appreciate your time today. Thanks so very much for spending it with us and giving us your insights, and continued success. Another successful musician and craftsman in the music industry. Thanks so very much.
Well, thank you, Mark. I really appreciate it.
This is Mark Skoda with The Independent Musician. Catch you all next week.
Thanks for joining us this week on The Independent Musician. Make sure to visit our website, IronGateRecordsRadio.com, where you can subscribe to the show on your favorite streaming platform, so you'll never miss an episode. While you're at it, if you found value in this podcast, we'd appreciate you giving us feedback, or simply tell a friend about the show. Be sure to tune in next week for a new episode of The Independent Musician, where the independent musician is the star.